Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Deku and Kaminari were brothers part 1. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. And also go support the Drakapist for writing that awesome fanfic. Let's start this video. Deku Midoriya stared at the screen, his big green eyes swimming with tears as he watched his idol. It wasn't fair, he wanted to be a hero. Sitting in an office chair that seemed to swallow him and holding his All Might action figure tight, Izuku lamented the day's events. Why don't I have a quirk? I don't know anyone that doesn't have a quirk. Mom has a quirk and so does dad. He lit the candles on my birthday cake. Mom is always picking things up around the house with her quirk. What does my pinky toe have to do with it? Why doesn't mom think I can be a hero? A steady stream of tears were soon accompanied by a hiccup, and the snot dribbling down his face was beginning to be a problem for the distraught child. Rubbing his eyes, Izuku stood shakily to reach for a box of tissues on the desk. The chair wobbled beneath him, and as he leant forward the wheels rolled back. He gasped and reached for the desk to steady himself. In the process he dropped his action figure. Grabbing a tissue he looked down to his toy. Sniffling he tried to reach down and grab his favorite comfort object. His short arms just couldn't reach it though, and he didn't want to get down. He couldn't get back in the chair on his own, and he didn't want to ask his mother. She had been so sad when she left the room, and he was still hurt that she hadn't had any faith in him. I can't even reach my toy. Maybe the doctor was right. Maybe mom was right. I wish things were different to mommy. Closing his eyes against the stinging tears, he reached for the All Might toy. I just want to be a hero, I just want to help people like All Might does. But I can't even help myself. The hiccuping started anew, and he focused on the figure trying to reach it. In that moment he felt something inside him, a kind of pressure in his little palm. Almost like a sticker was in the middle of his hand. It seemed to shoot forward, aiming from his palm to All Might on the ground. When this strange feeling reached the toy, it latched on, making another sticker. His curly-haired little head tilted to the side as he felt this odd sensation. He pulled his hand back in uncertainty, and the stickers seemed to pull as well. With a slap against his palm, the All Might was back in his hand. With eyes as big as dinner plates, Izuku stared at his hand and then at the toy. He looked for that feeling, and after a minute felt another sticker. His shock kept him from comprehending what had just happened. He moved to push the chair back to get down. When he reached for the desk in that moment he made another sticker on it, and when pushing back, the sticker pushed back too. He fell back into the chair as it was sent scooting back into the middle of the room, much farther than what he had intended with his own push. Now Izuku was truly in awe and began to cry once more. Laughter accompanied these tears though, and he began to grasp what had just happened. This is great. I have to show mom. I have a quirk. His little legs moving too fast, Izuku's sock-laden little feet almost slipped out from under him on the hardwood floor as he rushed to show his mother this new discovery. Inko was sprawled on the couch, her face buried in a pillow. She was exhausted, and the small sea of tissues around her showed that she had spent the better part of the previous hour crying her eyes out. Her head lifted a smidge when she heard the patter of little feet headed into the living room. She hoped Izuku would forgive her. Maybe he was hungry and she could make him a late snack. Something warm and comforting might help her too. She expected to see her little boy crying still, maybe with even a little snot running down his chin. While both of those were present, she wasn't expecting the smile that joined them. Inko propped herself up to greet the grinning rascal. Forcing a small grin of her own on her face and rubbed her eyes. Mom, I have a quirk like you, mom. The excitement on his little face was so adorable that it brought fresh tears to her eyes. Pretending to have a quirk wouldn't help him, but she would play along. Just for tonight. Do you now? What kind of quirk do you have, my little hero? It hurt her to give him false hope, but she couldn't make herself bring him down any further. Like I said, mommy, it's like yours. Watch this. Looking around, Izuku found one of the tissue boxes on the coffee table. Reaching forward he grasped at the box and pulled it to him. The box flew across the room and slapped into his waiting palm. Inko moved a hand to hide her gasping mouth. Fresh tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. It was too good to be true, but she had seen it with her own eyes. Getting up from the couch, stumbling over her own feet, she rushed to her son. Scooping him up in her arms she held him close. Crying freely now, Inko kissed all over her son's little face. I'm so happy for you, sweetheart. I can't believe it, you have a quirk. Sniffle, oh my baby. I'm so sorry about before, I was wrong. If you want to be a hero, then I believe you can be a hero. She squeezed him close as the waterworks started up anew. If it was possible, Izuku's grin grew even wider and he hugged his mother back. Leaning back after a moment he held up the tissue box. Do you need a tissue, mommy? The watery grin was followed by a broken laugh as Inko took a tissue from the box. My sweet little hero. Already looking out for others, huh? You really will be a great hero. Inko picked up her son and headed to the kitchen. This calls for a celebration. How about you give me a sec and I'll make a snack for us. The cries of joy and agreement rang through the night, sounding a bell that heralded a new hero being born. Inko Midoriya was woken by a shattering sound coming from the kitchen. A soft wail soon followed. Leaping out of bed, she rushed out of her room, her face distraught at the sound of her child crying. Leaving her room, she found Izuku clutching his hand and broken bowl pieces scattered all over the floor. Inko practically slid across the floor to reach her baby and make sure he was alright. Oh my gosh. Honey, are you alright? Baby, let me see, let mommy see. Worrying over Izuku's hand, she saw a large cut but couldn't find any pieces of the bowl lodged in his hand. Still, this might need some stitches. Ooh, we need to go to the hospital. First aid kit first and then we go. What happened though? Izuku, look at mommy, sweetheart. It'll be alright, I'm going to wrap this up and then we're going to hospital to make sure this gets fixed up, okay? When Izuku's shaking little head bobbed up and down, she went to the cabinet and grabbed the kit off the shelf. Coming back from the cabinet, she held Izuku's wrist and applied some antiseptic spray before wrapping it with gauze. As soon as Inko finished doing that, she picked up her son, grabbed her purse, threw on some slippers, and rushed him out the door and down the stairs. Normally she wouldn't wave down a cab, but this was important and she was quick to hop into the back of one when it stopped upon her, flagging it down. The cab driver was an older man with what looked like 3 crosses on his head. Where to miss? The cab driver looked thrown off by something, though Inko just assumed it was the child with tears running down his face. Yusutafu General, and please be quick. My son cut his hand and it looks deep. Inko was so focused on her son she didn't notice the odd look the driver was giving her. The driver took a peek at the boy in the woman's arms and a look of comprehension crossed his face. Nodding his head, he looked forward and began to pull out onto the road. Alright miss, no worries, I'll get you there as fast as I can. Buckle up please. Following the driver's request, she placed a seatbelt around Izuku and herself. Izuku had stopped crying at this point and was just holding his hand and biting his lip. Inko still had no idea what had happened though. Izuku, honey, can you tell mommy what happened? How did you hurt your hand? Izuku's head turned to the side and he gave a little shrug. Inko knew this tactic though. It was rare that Izuku did it, but if he thought he would get in trouble for something, he would try and plead ignorance. It happened most often when he did something he knew his mother considered too dangerous. Her brows furrowed a little in frustration. Izuku, I need you to look at me and tell me what happened. I promise I won't get mad. You still want to be a hero, right? Well, heroes shouldn't lie. Especially to their mothers. She leant down and placed her hand underneath Izuku's chin and pushed his head up with her finger. Looking at his mother, Izuku began to tear up a little. I just wanted to get the bowls down with my quirk for breakfast. But when I pulled the first one down, it moved too fast and broke on my hand. I'm sorry mommy, I didn't mean to break the bowl. Inko blinked for a moment. A tired smile broke across her face as she shook her head at her silly little boy. He actually thought she would be mad about the bowl. She wasn't the only one who found the whole thing amusing though. The cab driver, having heard the whole thing, laughed up front. Just got your quirk then, huh little man? Don't worry about it too much. Accidents happen, and most kids end up breaking something when they first find out about their quirks. Heck, I remember my oldest when he got his slip quirk, tried to race around the house and ended up busting his head open on the kitchen table. Wasn't funny at the time, but you learn to look back and laugh. The story got a grin out of little Izuku. He was glad that it wasn't just him that messed up with his quirk. He was upset that he had broken the bowl and embarrassed that he had to go to the hospital. Inko was grateful for the driver's words, they appeared to have taken Izuku's mind off the cut. She was also happy to know that this was a rather common occurrence. She only vaguely remembered being scolded as a small child for breaking things when she was working out a quirk. Roughly 15 minutes later, they arrived at the hospital. Pulling out Izuku from the taxi, Inko turned back to the driver to ask what the fare was. The moment she did though, he waved her off. I've been there, miss. I remember that panic and the rush to make sure they're okay. You just get him taken care of. Besides, everyone wants to be a hero these days. Figure I can have my own little heroic moment. You two have a good day, and I hope you get better, little man. After thanking the man for his generosity, Inko walked into the hospital and went hurriedly to the urgent care. Filling out a sheet and taking a seat, the room was thankfully empty for the most part. It wasn't long before they were in an examining room. Placing Izuku on the examining table, they were told a nurse would be there soon. The taller woman with a cat quirk of some kind, if the ears were any indication, came to see them not long after. Let's see here. Looks like we had a little bit of an accident, did we? No worries, kiddo, you aren't the first we've seen this week. Doubt you'll be the last. Now let's take a look at that hand. Crouching down a bit to get to eye level, she held her own hand out towards her young patient. Izuku blushed as he shyly placed his hand in the admittedly pretty nurse's hand. He flinched a bit as she carefully unwound the gauze and got a good look at the cut. Good news, little man, I don't think you'll need stitches, but we'll go ahead and apply a skin adhesive to help everything heal a little faster. You're a real trooper though, I know a lot of kids would be in here crying from a cut like that. Grinning at the little boy, she stood up and patted his head. Izuku blushed even harder and puffed his chest out just a little bit. His mother sat to the side and hid a grin with her hand. The nurse herself chuckled a bit and turned to Inko. I'm going to get the adhesive and I'll be back in a moment. Do you have any questions, any concerns? Turning to the nurse, Inko thought for a moment before she came upon a question she wanted to ask. Not in regards to the cut, but is Dr. Urahara in? I wanted to speak to him about Izuku's quirk. Best to get to the bottom of this now. I'll take a look for you, Mrs. Midoriya. Give me just a minute and I'll be back. After the nurse left, Izuku sat dangling his legs from the examining table as Inko gave her work a call to let them know that she wouldn't be able to come in that day. By the time she got off the phone, the nurse had returned to the room. The nurse applied the adhesive to the cut and explained the care that would need to go into maintaining it for the next week. Dr. Urahara is in and he said to tell you that he would be down here in about 15 minutes. He sounded pretty surprised when I mentioned you being here about your son's quirk. But you'll be fine, sweetheart, and be careful with that quirk. I don't want to see you back here anytime soon. Okay. Patting his curly little head once more as he bobbed it up and down in concurrence with her request. Oh, and Mrs. Midoriya, I was wondering if you could tell me where you got those all-night pajamas. They're rather cute. It took a moment for the comment to register with Inko before she looked down and her whole face turned red. Well, they weren't in any way revealing she had just traipsed about the whole city in her pajamas. Now Izuku hid a grin from his mother behind his little hand. Not long after the older doctor that had delivered devastating news to the two Midoriyas just yesterday walked through the door. Mrs. Midoriya, I wasn't expecting to see you back so soon. Now what's this I hear about young Izuku's quirk? I don't mean to be insensitive, but are you sure this wasn't just wishful thinking? Dr. Urahara's eyebrow was cocked in doubt. Inko's lips pursed in aggravation. She could understand his doubt, but she didn't appreciate it. Reaching into her purse, she pulled out her wallet and placed it on her lap. Izuku showed Dr. Urahara what you showed me last night. Just be sure to use your hand, that's not hurt. Giving her son an encouraging smile. Izuku reached his arm out with his mother and the doctor watching on. He was a little nervous with people watching him this intently. But he reached out for the same feeling and with a little grunt pulled the wallet slapping back into his hand. Dr. Urahara's jaw just dropped. A satisfied grin spread across Inko's face. She couldn't do that, but it was obviously a stronger variant of her own quirk. It filled her whole body with warmth, knowing that she had been able to pass on something that her baby could use to fulfill his dream. A quirk that brought that blinding little grin to his face. I did it, mommy. Did you see? Did you see I did it? Oh, and watch what else I can do. With a jump to his feet and the wallet in hand, he seemed to concentrate once more and sent the wallet back to his mother. Thankfully his aim was off a little as the wallet went whizzing through the air and smashed into the drywall. Inko's eyes got fairly big and Izuku's face was frozen. Oops, I'm sorry, mommy. I didn't mean to make it go so fast. Izuku's head dropped and he stared at his feet. Meanwhile, the doctor had gotten a hold of himself and sweat dropped at the now embedded wallet. Pulling up a chair, he sat down for what was going to be an interesting conversation. Now isn't that just something? Never thought I'd see a case of this outside of medical studies. So, as we have just seen, young Izuku does indeed have a quirk. The good doctor began his explanation only to be cut off by Inko. Yes, but yesterday you said that he didn't and wouldn't have a quirk. So why would you tell us that? A small glare leveled at the doctor. The man in question raised his hands in a placating fashion, trying to diffuse the woman's wrath. Well, now hold on a minute. I admit that what I said yesterday definitely was intended to come across that way, but if you remember, I said that your son should probably give up being a hero and that it was safe to say based on research that he wouldn't develop a quirk. Very rarely is anything 100% in the medical field, especially when it comes to the subject of quirks. What we have here is an extraordinarily rare case. The extra joint is the easiest way to determine whether or not a person is quirkless, but it isn't foolproof. 1 in every 20,000 individuals that have 2 joints in their pinky toe still exhibit quirks. Sometimes they show up later in that individual's life, and sometimes, like with Izuku, they manifest at the same time as single joint children. But the odds of that happening are extremely low. I would never have brought it up with you because of how rare this occurrence is. I mean, we're talking about a 1 in 100,000 chance shot. It would have been cruel of me to bring up something that was so unlikely to occur. I hope you understand. I am very happy to see that little Izuku here has in fact manifested a quirk. I would be happy to run some blood work if you like, but given the hole in the wall, I am fairly certain that we already have confirmation of the existence of your son's quirk. The long-winded speech aside, Inko was ecstatic to know her son had beaten the odds. Being reminded of the hole in the wall, however. Thank you so much for clearing that up. I was clueless as to what exactly had happened. I am so sorry about the hole in the wall. I'll reimburse you for the damages, of course. Her head hanging low and thinking about the day her son's quirk had brought about. Still, it was worth it if it meant keeping that smile on his face. Turning to look at the hole in the wall, Dr. Urahara sighed. It really wasn't a big deal, but the hospital could make it out to be a bigger hassle than it actually was if a patient was involved. Don't worry about it, I'll tell them that I slipped or something. The hospital won't even look twice. Now why don't you two head on home? I think that Izuku there maybe needs to practice with his quirk a bit. Might I suggest pillows however if you're going to practice inside? Inko nodded while rubbing the back of her head nervously. 45 embarrassing public pajama-clad minutes later, the two Midoriyas were back at the apartment. A quick promise to not use his quirk until later, and Inko set to cleaning up the kitchen, taking a shower and changing into something more socially acceptable to wear in public. Once all that was done and they had something to eat, Inko agreed to practicing with her son's quirk. Alright Izuku, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take the couch pillows and you're going to practice moving them from the kitchen table to the couch. Okay. Izuku of course was nodding his head along at rapid speed. Bouncing around his mother, he couldn't wait to use his quirk. So first let's practice the push part of your quirk. Soft or not, I would rather we didn't send pillows flying at you. Inko placed a few pillows on the kitchen table and then Izuku on a chair at the table. Her son's excitement was contagious and the smile on his face was quickly matched by her own. Alright little hero, the ship is sinking and you need to throw the people to safety. But that kind of encouragement, the little boy couldn't help but give a shout and promptly fire off the plush couch-bound missile. One sticker in the palm and another to the pillow, followed by a push. Off the pillow went, zooming to the couch. While Izuku played with his new quirk, Inko watched closely to see how it worked. It looked like he was pushing the pillow and his quirk just sent it fly forward, but she couldn't tell what the process was. Izuku, what does your quirk feel like when you use it? Inko's question brought Izuku out of his revelry. What do you mean, mommy? To be fair, that question was rather broad for a 5-year-old to really grasp. Inko placed a finger to her chin as she thought on how to explain her question. I mean, when you use it, does it remind of some other feeling? Like when I use my quirk, it kind of feels like I'm sweeping something towards me. I have to make more sweeps the farther away the thing is. So does it maybe feel something like that? Inko hoped she got her point across that time. Izuku's little head tilted to the side and scrunched up his face and thought. It feels like a sticker. I make one sticker in my palm and then I place another sticker on something else. Then I push or pull it and it just moves. I think I can make it push or pull faster too. His little thinking face was so cute that Inko had to bite her lip to keep from grinning or just snatching him up and cuddle him. But no, she was trying to help him with his quirk. This wasn't the time. Well, can you make the first sticker somewhere else? It would make mommy very happy if she didn't have to worry about your hands getting hurt. Inko clapped her hands together, looking hopefully down at her little boy. Could he do that? He wasn't sure he could, but if it was for mom then he would try. Reaching for the power again, Izuku thought about placing that first sticker somewhere else. Lo and behold, when he focused on one of the pillows he could tell he had made the first sticker on it. Then he looked at the couch and made a second sticker there before finally having the pillow pull toward the couch. Once more the pillow leapt from the table to couch. Woohoo. Was that good, mommy? I did just like you asked and made it go to the couch without using my hand. Looking up to his mom for approval, she nodded her head and gave him a hug. You did great, Izuku. I am so proud of you. We'll have to celebrate for dinner tonight. What do you want to eat? This had been a long day and one discovery with his quirk would be enough for today. Hatsuden, mommy. Please can we? The future hero looked up at the woman who had given him this power with eyes full of love and appreciation. Looking back, Inko was overtaken with those same emotions. Scooping him up, she tickled his belly, making him squeal and laugh. Of course we can, sweetheart. It's a celebration for you after all. A yell of excitement was the response she was given. Izuku, I know I almost messed up and I know I hurt you. But it won't happen again. If you want to be a hero, then I'll help you any way I can. Inko's thoughts to herself in that moment would be the foundation that helped shape one of the world's greatest heroes. It was Izuku's first day of school since he had manifested his quirk and he couldn't wait to show everyone. Inko was walking him to his classroom to let his teachers know about his quirk. He and his mother had spent hours the previous day working out some of what he could do. They had figured out that Izuku could increase or decrease the speed of an object he could use his quirk on. Good thing to know, as it would hopefully prevent more hospital visits. The last thing they learned was that Izuku had a weight limit. Anything over 5 pounds and he struggled to make it budge. It gave him really bad headaches when he tried to move a full laundry basket. It had moved, slowly but surely, although his mother had been forced to give him headache medicine shortly thereafter. I can't wait to show Kakin. He started to pick up the pace a bit and began almost pulling his mother. Inko was quite amused with her son's enthusiasm and let him tug her to his classroom. Well, I'm glad to see he's so excited about getting back to school. Even if I am certain he wants to show off his quirk. With a little warning, hopefully the teachers could prevent any accidents from occurring. 15 minutes later, Izuku was waving goodbye to his mother before turning to the class. It wasn't hard to find Kakin, a small group of his own little followers was always around him. He was just so cool, even the teachers thought he had a cool quirk. Izuku hoped that Kakin thought his own quirk was cool too. Hey Kakin. I got my quirk. Now I can be a hero too. Isn't that awesome? Kitsuki Bakugo looked at Izuku skeptically. You're kind of a wimp, Deku. Even with a quirk, there's no way you could be a hero. But what kind of quirk do you have? Cool or not, Kitsuki could be a bit of a jerk. But that wouldn't get Izuku down. He was positive that Kakin would change his mind once he showed him his quirk. No, see, my quirk is really cool, it lets me move things without touching them. I'm sure I can be a hero. Kitsuki snorted at the proclamation. But before Izuku could show off his quirk, the teachers called them together to get started on the day's activities. It wasn't until later in the day during a recess period that Izuku was able to bring up his quirk again. He ran over to the tree located on the playground and waved over Kakin. Some other students noticed and followed the coolest kid in class to see what the wimp was up to. Kakin watched this. Reaching for his power, he found a stick nearby and latched on with his quirk. A moment later it came into his hand. Izuku was glad that he had figured out how to slow down the things he pulled to him. If the stick had come to his hand at the same speed as the bowl the other day, then it might have hurt. Several of the kids in class seemed to be fairly impressed with Izuku's quirk. Wow, that was kinda cool. Maybe he can be a hero. Man, I hope my quirk shows up soon too. Now for Kitsuki, this was not acceptable. His little ego had been fanned for several weeks now. There was no way that he was going to share even a little bit of the spotlight. He was the greatest. No way was he going to be shown up by the class dork. Eyes hardening, Kitsuki walked up to Izuku. So you can pick things up without grabbing them, huh? So are you gonna be some kind of super garbage man? Some of the other kids laughed, but a few just looked at Kitsuki in disapproval. That wasn't very nice. Izuku's little face fell. He had been so excited to show everyone his quirk. Kitsuki wasn't done though. That quirk is just like your mom's, isn't it? I heard my mommy talking about how useful your mom's quirk was for cleaning. But she can't pick up anything if it's too heavy. A few kids decided to leave at this point. Seeing a new quirk was cool, but not everyone wanted to stick around to watch Kitsuki be an ass. Izuku at this point was starting to cry out of frustration. He finally had a quirk of his own. I thought if I showed him my quirk that Kakin would think I was cool. Why is he being so mean? Izuku's tears seemed to be the objective. Kitsuki decided that he would make the little dork look like a crybaby, and then no one would think Izuku was cooler than him. I bet that stick is the heaviest thing you can move. Face it, Deku, you can't become a hero not with a weak quirk like your mom's. The moment those words left Kitsuki's mouth, a switch was flipped. Izuku wasn't prone to aggression, he didn't like confrontation. But standing up for someone else, especially for his mom, that he could do. Shut-ka-an. The sniffling ceased as he looked up at Kitsuki, his green eyes narrowing at the blonde bully. Eh? What was that, crybaby? I couldn't hear you. Hahaha, what a wuss. Kitsuki and his little group laughed at Izuku. They weren't paying much attention as Izuku began walking closer to Kitsuki. I said shut up, Kakin. Don't talk bad about my mommy. The glare was about as threatening as a 5-year-old's could be. But it got the point across. Kitsuki stopped laughing. The grin on his face changed into a cruel sneer. Stepping up to Izuku, he lifted his hand up and used his quirk to create sparks around his little palm. Oh, what are you gonna do about it? Are you gonna fight me? Huh, Deku. Getting right up in Izuku's face as he grilled the green-haired boy. Izuku paused for maybe half a second. Before glaring once more at the blonde in front of him. I don't have to fight you. You're a jerk, Kakin, and a bully. I know my mommy is the greatest, so that means you're a liar too. I'm gonna be a great hero no matter what you say. Needless to say, Izuku's response wasn't what Kitsuki had been expecting. He had just been told he was wrong, been denied by this weakling. To top it off, the little twerp had just called him a liar. Grabbing Izuku by the collar, Kitsuki proceeded to slug the poor boy in the face. Izuku stumbled back holding his bruised cheek. A number of kids left to get the teachers. Fighting wasn't allowed, and fighting with a quirk was really bad. Kitsuki wasn't done with his would-be punching bag. Lighting his quirk up, he went to hit the other boy again. A wide childlike swing still left Izuku stumbling back to keep from getting hit. Falling on his back, Izuku started scooting back to keep from getting burned as Kitsuki kept coming forward. See, Deku? You can't even fight back. You're too scared to even hit me. So what makes you think you can be a hero? Taking a knee, he reached down for Izuku again. But Izuku wasn't going to just lie there and get burned. Reaching for his quirk, Izuku swung his fist straight into Kitsuki's side. A point at his fist and a point at Kitsuki's side, and when that fist just about reached that point, Izuku pushed. The end result was that Kitsuki went rolling to the side and was left gasping as he clutched his side. Izuku just sat there looking at his hand and then at Kitsuki. Oops. Of course this was the scene that the two teachers showed up to see. Scooping up both of the two children, Kitsuki was taken to the nurse's office and Izuku to the principal's office. It took a little while for the teachers to get the full story from the other students, and there were a few conflicting tales from some of the kids. But ultimately it was pretty clear that Kitsuki had picked a fight with Izuku using his quirk. Then Izuku ended up finishing it using his own quirk. Both of the children's parents were called in. Why, you little brat. I can't believe you tried to burn another kid. And it was little Izuku too. I thought you two were friends. Oh, just you wait until we get home. Mrs. Bakugo was a rather intense woman. Who thankfully didn't put up with her child's or anyone's crap. Still though, couldn't she have waited until they got home? Were the thoughts that crossed everyone else's heads in that moment. Sweat drops on the back of their heads. Shaking his head a bit, the principal cleared his throat to get the attention of the office's other occupants. Now I do understand that both boys are very young and that both have recently manifested their quirks. But this is simply unacceptable. We cannot have playground brawls where children are using potentially very dangerous abilities. Both boys will be suspended for the next 2 days, and we expect both of them to be informed of the responsibilities that come with such gifts. But that being said, you are both free to take them home. The time spent going back to their apartment was spent in silence. Every time Izuku looked up at his mom to say something, her disappointed face stopped him every time. When they did finally get back to the apartment, Inko brought her son into the living room and sat him down on the couch with her. Honey, why did you do that? I know you know better. I understand why you might have used your quirk at the end. But why didn't you just walk away before it turned into a fight? It was obvious that she was rather upset and the corners of her eyes were already starting to water. Izuku's little head sunk with shame. He didn't mean to make her sad. I didn't walk away because he said that you were weak. But you're not, and I called him a liar and a bully, and then he punched me. I'm sorry, mommy, I didn't mean to get in trouble or make you mad at me. His head hung low. He couldn't bring himself to look at his mother. Inko blinked a few times before she smiled sadly. Her little baby had been defending her honor. She sniffled for a bit before grabbing Izuku and pulling him into a hug. Settling him into her lap, his little arms grasping tightly to her, she whispered into his hair. My sweet little hero. I'm tickled that you thought to stand up for me, but they were just words. I think Kakin was just trying to rile you up and make you upset. You can't pay attention to bullies. If you're going to be a hero, then you'll have to get used to people saying mean things. But you have to be stronger than that. Don't pay attention to what they say and remember what you know to be true. I believe in you and I bet you'll be the greatest hero. Now the waterworks started up for real as mother and son held on tight to one another. These past few days had just been a roller coaster of emotions for the both of them. Much of the next day for Inko and Izuku was spent going over what was and wasn't acceptable with a quirk. Public use of a quirk for any reason outside of self-preservation was only tolerated in small children. Likewise, fighting, again outside of self-defense, with a quirk was a criminal offense. Izuku definitely didn't want to be a villain, so promised not to use his quirk to fight with his classmates again. Inko was glad for the promise, but wanted to ensure that Izuku didn't accidentally lash out and hurt someone. Which meant him getting a much better grasp on his abilities. Usually this wasn't an issue until later in school. Around 2nd grade, schools had a mandatory quirk counseling class to help children better adapt to their powers. But Inko was concerned that waiting that long might invite further incidents, given the bullying that had occurred at school the previous day. There were centers for exercising one's quirk that allowed people to fully utilize their quirks. Government owned and operated to make sure no one was abusing said buildings and the freedom allowed therein. Counselors were available there, but most parents had similar enough quirks to allow them to assist their own children. Instruments were available with a small fee to better record and assess a child's quirk. Inko wasn't quite willing to throw in the towel and let someone else take over teaching her baby. Especially when the quirk was so obviously derived from her own. Which ultimately brought them to one of said facilities on the 2nd day. A large concrete building towards the outskirts of town with a wide open area fenced off behind it to allow people more space with which to use their quirks. Arranging for a practice court and some equipment was rather straightforward, and soon the two Midoriyas were testing Izuku's quirk to the limits. Izuku was ecstatic to have all but free reign to use his quirk as he pleased, though Inko still preferred that he didn't bring any objects flying toward himself. The whole day was spent with Izuku pushing and pulling various weights and objects to see the current limits his quirk held. Inko was nervous at the beginning. It had after all only been a few days since Izuku had manifested his quirk, and he had already managed to wind up in the hospital once and injure another child. As the day progressed, however, she loosened up a bit in order to see what all her son could really do. The baseball had been brought in with them to test his speed with something on the lighter end of the spectrum. The courts were equipped with speedometers for those with quirks that could be measured in such a manner. With the baseball, Izuku could easily reach speeds of up to 26 kilometers an hour. Rather impressive for a 5-year-old. After the baseball, Inko had Izuku try and lift as heavy an object as he could, but at the moment he couldn't lift anything heavier than about 3 kilos without incurring a nasty headache. While not especially heavy, Inko knew quirk strengthened over time. It was found that Izuku's quirk had a max range of about 8 meters. Meaning he could probably reach anywhere he wanted inside his classroom. Or reach the cookies on the top shelf, as Izuku pointed out. The look his mother had given him for that comment assured him that the cookies would undoubtedly be moved in the future. Lastly, in terms of limitations, Izuku could only manipulate a single object at a time. It was rather late in the day when Inko had thought to test that aspect of his quirk though, so perhaps it might be possible to improve upon that too. In general, the quirk worked like a magnet that could push or pull the world around him. The exception to that was that most magnets attracted or repelled one another depending upon the polarity. Whereas with Izuku's quirk only one object in question would budge. Izuku claimed however that he thought he could make them come together, but that it was a funny feeling that he couldn't quite reach. Overall, the day was rather productive and saw the duo returning home with smiles. The next day was Izuku's first day back at class and he was hesitant to see Kaken again. The green-haired boy wasn't interested in getting into another fight. He didn't like upsetting his mother. Thankfully Mitsuki, Kitsuki's mother, had met them at the gate with a sullen Kitsuki. The blonde boy had been forced to apologize for what he said, and with a little prompting from his mother, Izuku had returned the gesture. Trying to show that there were no hard feeling between them. It seemed the effort was lost on Kaken though. As soon as both mothers left, he glared at Izuku. "Listen up, Deku, I won't kick your butt right now. I can't be the greatest hero ever if I get into trouble too much. But if you think for a second that we're friends any more, then you can forget it. Oh, and next time we fight I'm gonna kick your crybaby butt." The little blonde hellion stomped away after having said his piece. Needless to say, Izuku wasn't too surprised. He had come to school today already having given up on any friendship remaining intact between the two of them. Honestly, he had thought Kaken might have started a fight as soon as he could. So to just ignore each other was probably the best resolution. The rest of his kindergarten year saw Izuku and his mother returning to the center 3 times a week to practice his quirk and studying at school. Every once in a while Izuku would have a play date with one of his classmates, but none of his peers were much interested in incurring Kitsuki's wrath. Being friends with a Deku was a surefire way to earn the little Pyro's ire. Still, Izuku had an enjoyable remainder of the year after that initial quarrel. Keeping his grades up in school while refining his quirk. A lack of social circle allowed for more study time and free afternoons in which to train. While his range of influence had not expanded past 8 meters and he could still only manipulate a single object at a time, the other aspects of his quirk had all improved. His max weight limit had grown to 7 kilos and his speed had increased to a whopping 32 kilometers an hour, with any object weighing a kilo or less. Christmas in the Midoriya household was an odd affair. Mostly because of Izuku's father. Working abroad, the man only really came home twice a year. Once on Christmas and once on Izuku's birthday. While Izuku loved these occasions, there was a certain amount of distance that Hisashi placed between his wife and himself. Enough to make Inko notice, but not enough to ruin festivities. The first grade year continued much in the way kindergarten had. With 3 days of quirk practice, school Monday through Friday, and watching all he could in regards to the current most popular heroes. All Might was, and always would be, the boy's favorite. He was Izuku's idol and just listening to the man laugh invoked a feeling of awe. But that didn't mean that other heroes weren't cool too. Endeavor, Best Jeanist, Crimson Riot and dozens of other heroes would feature on the TV or computer, depending on the time of day in the Midoriya household. The biggest difference between kindergarten and first grade had been an unfortunate chain of events at school that Inko was helpless to change and Izuku was too slow to prevent. Izuku's first grade class featured a rather drastic change in faces for the boy. Over half the class of the previous year had not returned for first grade. Having either moved away or been enrolled in nicer schools. With this many new faces came a new variety of quirks and ample opportunity to show off. Itsuki undoubtedly had the flashiest and likely strongest quirk in the class. So naturally he pulled in a crowd much like had done the year before. The many new faces enamored with the powerful quirk. This was how the trouble started. Of the students that remained from the kindergarten year before, the majority were those children that had been in Kitsuki's corner. One of these children began a nasty rumor amongst the class, telling of the fight the previous year between Kitsuki and Izuku. The way the story was told, Izuku had started the fight after misunderstanding something Kitsuki had said. The fight was of course made overly dramatic, but small children are quick to latch onto such stories without the benefit of learned skepticism. At the end of the fight, Kitsuki had won and tried to help Izuku up. Then Izuku had used his quirk and seriously injured the other boy. Izuku did not hear of this story until late into the year. He had assumed the new students were shy like him and so did not approach any of them until nearly into the second semester. By that time the tale of Deku, the kid who used his quirk to hurt people, had circulated to class. When he had finally discovered the reason for his peers' distance, Izuku tried to argue his case, but no one was willing to listen. Even going to Katsuki to try and get him to tell the truth didn't work. "Deku, I don't know what you expect me to do. They already know what happened, so why would me telling it to them be any different?" The smirk on the Katsuki's face had shown vindictive pleasure in regards to Izuku's pained face. Izuku had come home crying that day, and it took Inko nearly an hour to get Izuku to tell her what was wrong. As his mother, she of course tried to rectify the situation with his class, but only served to worsen the situation. Now it looked as though Izuku was a crybaby that told his mommy lies when he didn't get his way. Izuku appreciated the effort though, and didn't blame his mother. In the end he just accepted his isolation amongst the class and made the best out of his time outside of school to keep a grin on his face. He had to grin, even when it hurt. All Might never stopped grinning, so he wouldn't either. By the end of the first grade year, Izuku's quirk had improved further. Though Inko was beginning to think maybe she should hire someone to take over his training. There had been a few close calls that nearly resulted in what could have been serious injuries. Some days were certainly more stressful than others. She had found a gray hair the other day. Regardless, she had pressed forward to provide Izuku with as much direction as she could. Most exciting was that Izuku ended the year being able to manipulate two objects at the same time. This was of course still mitigated by his weight limit, and so he had to divide his ability between the two objects, but it was still progress. His sphere of influence had finally improved, though not by much. He was now able to manipulate objects as far as 10 meters away. Izuku had been frustrated with the fact that he just couldn't reach anything further than that. On the flip side, his maximum weight and speed had both improved. Lifting and moving objects weighing 11 kilos or less was within his power, and he was able to repel any marked item weighing 2 kilos or less at speeds of up to 45 kilometers an hour. Izuku took the good with the bad that year and showed his mother that he was a very resilient child. Inko was proud of him for his attitude and accomplishments for the year. Only one real difference marked second grade from the previous 2 years. But that was halfway through the second semester. Izuku's class didn't feature any new faces this year and served to cement the self-isolationist policy Izuku had begun taking up. It was easier to not bother with his classmates of his own volition than to face rejection from his peers. He was polite and smiled whenever called upon, but didn't engage himself with the rest of the class any more than needed. Akin had now firmly become Bakugo, any attempts at maintaining an at least amicable relationship a foregone conclusion. Izuku ignored his crowing as much as he did the rest of the class. Most of Izuku's free time was dedicated to one of three things now. The first was his quirk. Even outside of the training center, Izuku had taken to training around the house every instant he got. Using his quirk for a multitude of different tasks helped him better understand how to wield it. He had been forbidden from using it in the kitchen though. His mother had come in one day from shopping while he had been doing dishes, only to see a pair of knives hovering too close to her baby for comfort. The oops that had answered her high-pitched gasp had apparently not been the correct response. By the end of the year, his constant practice and sessions at the center had shown in his skill with his quirk. A sphere of influence reaching 14 meters, able to manipulate an object or objects with a total weight of up to 15 kilos, able to fire off an object weighing as much as 5 kilos at speeds as fast as 60 kilometers an hour, and managing to add 2 more sets of points, allowing him to manipulate a total of 4 objects at once now. Izuku's second pastime, that was perhaps even more time-consuming than his exercises, was his hero analysis. 2 notebooks were now full of scribbles and thoughts on the various abilities and tactics of many of the most popular heroes. It had become a bit of an obsession for Izuku, cataloging the great heroes of his time and considering the many different ways they went about their jobs. Disaster relief, local crime, supervillains, and criminal organizations. Every hero had their own way of handling those facets of their career. Izuku was interested in taking all of that knowledge so as to use it to his advantage later down the line. But maybe even more so than the way they handled their career was how those heroes used their quirks. Izuku was determined to be the #1 hero someday. To use his quirk, just as his hero All Might did, with a smile on his face. To not just bring relief and aid but to be that relief. To that end he would take the techniques of the best and commit them to memory. Meanwhile Inko had become increasingly concerned for her son. While she was happy that Izuku was doing well in school and proud of his progress with his quirk, she had seen his distance from his peers. It seemed that he didn't have anyone to talk to outside of herself. This was saddening to the woman. A child shouldn't only have a parent to talk to. It had led to Izuku having some social insecurities. While he was perfectly polite and was capable of holding a conversation with an adult, the young boy became nervous when confronted with someone his own age. Ultimately though, it was the loneliness in Izuku's eyes when she picked him up from school that hurt her the most. The slight longing that she only barely caught whenever Izuku glanced at his peers as they wandered off into their own friend groups. It was probably for that very reason that she allowed Izuku to bring a treacherous counter-clearing, death-bringing, blue-eyed, black-furred little scoundrel into their home. Inko, as it turned out, wasn't the biggest fan of cats. Who knew? Halfway through the second semester, Izuku had managed to convince his mother to take him to a nearby park after school one day. The park in question had been the site of a recent battle between Best Jeanist and a supervillain. Izuku hoped to find some of Best Jeanist's strings. It would have been a prized piece of his collection of hero memorabilia. The place was something of a wreck despite being nearly 2 days past the fight itself. Trees bisected neatly and large gouges in the earth scattered everywhere. It was honestly starting to scare Inko. This was what her baby was getting into. This was what he wanted to do. Ooh, I don't like this. My baby is supposed to be getting into fights with people that can do this. Looking around, she surveyed the damaged park as Izuku searched everywhere for some string left behind by one of the world's greatest heroes. It's one thing to see it on the news, but seeing the destruction in person puts it into a new light. A scary one at that. But I don't think I can turn him away now. He's put so much work into his quirk. Heck, I've put so much effort into his quirk. I can only hope that all of that work will keep him safe. Inko's eyes, closed in deep thought as they were, completely missed Izuku scampering into a large pile of debris in his search of his quarry. Izuku was pretending he was a hero on a search and rescue mission looking for the string. The large pile of tree limbs, destroyed park benches, and the like made for an excellent allegory to a crumbled down building. Don't worry, string. I'll save you. Then I'll find you a place on my wall of heroes. Hahaha. Honestly, had anyone else heard the boy's thoughts, they might have been a little disturbed. Fanboy thoughts had a tendency to start normal and end weird. Sadly, the quest for the string looked to be in vain. It was starting to get late, and he was sure his mother had just called for him too. Sighing in disappointment, he kicked a small rock to the side and headed back to his mother. The rock in question, though, hit something else. Something that responded with a weak whine that Izuku only just barely caught. Looking back, Izuku searched for the source of the noise. There underneath a branch was a small black kitten. It was trapped, with its little paw stuck underneath a branch. It appeared pitiful and weak, glancing up at Izuku. Its ribs were plainly visible, indicating it had probably been a while since it had eaten last. Izuku went to free the little feline, but couldn't budge the branch. The cat's eyes were pleading with him, and Izuku couldn't leave the kitten alone now. He had to save it. How could he call himself a hero if he couldn't even save the cat? Reaching for his quirk, he focused on the branch, making 4 points on the branch, and pushed it up off the cat. It bent and bent, and the moment it was up off the black kitten, Izuku rushed into the rescue. The moment he grabbed the kitten, he stepped back and let go of the branch, which came snapping back. At this point, he could definitely hear his mother calling out for him. Izuku hurried out of his little enclosure. His mother was starting to sound a little upset, and he didn't want to make her cry. So holding the cat carefully, the 8-year-old boy ran to his mom. "Mom, I'm here. Look what I found, Mom." Izuku had to show his mom. It was his first work as a hero after all. Inko meanwhile was having to calm herself down a bit. She'd fallen into one of the oldest traps a parent could. She had only taken her eyes off Izuku for a moment. That was usually all it took for a small child to wander off in a new environment. "Izuku, don't wander off like that, honey. You nearly gave mommy a heart attack." Her hand on her chest, she gave a relieved sigh. Izuku, however, was still trying to get her to look at whatever he had found. "Mommy, look. I saved a kitty. Just like a hero does. I rescued someone." Izuku was so proud of himself, and the grin he had on his face reached his eyes. Inko blinked a bit at the proclamation before taking a better look at the object of her son's excitement. Indeed, there was a black little kitten, and she had to hold back a groan. Inko had never been the biggest fan of cats. Her aunt had owned a horde of the creatures, and the animals had delighted in clawing at her hands and tearing up her things whenever she had visited. This particular cat was very small and looked rather worse for wear. Izuku was cradling the thing carefully, and the kitten had curled itself up in his arms. Izuku's words registered in Inko's mind, and she smiled kindly. "Wow, good job, little hero. I'm so proud of you. That kitten doesn't look very good though. Why don't we take it to an animal shelter? They can take care of him and make him better." Inko was happy for her son and his feeling of accomplishment, but she wasn't keen on staying around the kitten for any longer than she had to. Izuku, on the other hand, seemed to have different plans. The kind that Inko was trying to avoid. "Oh, but Mom, can't we keep him? I promise I'll take care of Ichi. I'll make sure he gets better." Now Inko did groan. She did not want to bring a cat back to the apartment, not because it would cause any problems. The landlord was something of a crazy cat lady herself and might even waive the fee. No, Inko just wasn't looking forward to cat scratches everywhere and meowing at night. Izuku honey, our apartment isn't very big. You'd have to share your room with him, and taking care of a cat can be a lot of work. Are you sure you want to do that? And where did Ichi come from? Izuku frowned a bit at his mother's words. Before holding the kitten just a smidge tighter. I promise I'll take care of him, mommy, and I don't mind sharing my room. It might be nice to have someone else to play with. And he's itchy cause he's the first one. Inko's eyes watered at the edges. She knew Izuku had been lonely, but she hadn't considered a pet. The last bit confused her though. First what, honey? Izuku looked up at his mother with big green eyes and said with a slightly glum face. He was worried his mother wouldn't let him keep the kitten. The first person I've saved with my quirk, mommy. Now Inko just caved. She couldn't say no. Not to that face. Not to those words. Well, I guess we'll have to run by a pet store and get Ichi what he needs. Izuku's face shined with the grin he gave his mother. His little green hair bobbed up and down as he danced around his mother. Inko could only grin in exasperation. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support the Drakapist for writing that awesome fanfic. See you in the next video. Goodbye.